nonprofit sector. So everybody give a very warm welcome to Mr. Robert Egger. Robert Egger.
All right. Well, hey, man, I always want to start these things, particularly after such a generous introduction, by saying, hello, man, my name is Robert, and I'm a recovering hypocrite. Because, man, that shit all sounds good. But, actually, I'll riff for a little bit. When I speak, I speak extemporaneously. I try my best not to overanalyze or overthink. But, years ago, I did get to be on Oprah, and it was quite a treat. I was an Oprah angel. And, interesting little sidebar, when you're on Oprah angel, you get a $100,000 check from, the big O herself. And, I was walking through the airport, and I had just been dropped off by a limo, and I've just been on the Oprah show, And people are like, what's it like meeting Oprah? And it's like a near-death experience, because there's a doorway, and you don't know what's behind it, and it opens, and there's a bright light, and you walk towards it, and there she is. She's God, But I was walking through the airport, and have you ever been to one of those things where it's changed my way of thinking? And this is kind of what I want to talk about today, because I was just a dude in the airport, but I had a $100,000 check in my pocket, and I'd just been on Oprah, and I got that sense. Now when I walk through airports, I realize, man, everybody's got a story. Everybody's doing, it's not all polka dots and moonbeams, but I keep looking at people, realizing that there's somebody out there who probably has something they want to talk about, that they're excited about, that's changed their world. But what's interesting about that episode is I had a chance to talk not only during the show, but afterwards we did a little thing. But I actually kind of challenged O. Because, she was like, this whole thing was that I was an angel. And it's like, I said to her on the show, it's like, look, I love this thing and I'm so honored, but dude, I'm not an angel. Man, I'm a sinner. I'm a delightful sinner. But I'm a sinner who's trying. And when you say somebody's an angel, when you project that on somebody, it can really give people the sense that they can't do that. Somehow, they're not up to the task. And the reality is we're all up to the task. I'd rather that she had the Oprah Sinner Award, because that really makes it more real, and it doesn't let people off the hook for the reality that we can all make a change. And that's been what I've kind of been about most of my career now. Again, I ran nightclubs, and again, can we give it up for the musicians tonight? Man. But it's like, I was convinced that the power of music could be used so powerfully to disguise really important ideas. I grew up here in LA in the 1960s when both Dr. King was murdered in Memphis, but then Robert Kennedy right here in Los Angeles in 1968. That had a huge impact on my young life. But I watched my mother and father and their friends argue incessantly about music. But man, you put on a Motown record and they were out on the dance floor, and I became mesmerized by the power of music to get people to hear ideas. Again, when you listen to Motown as a kid, I listened and thought, dang, everything they're singing and dancing and shouting at the top of their lungs are the same ideas that Dr. King had, that Robert Kennedy had. Why is it that they'll listen to this, but they won't hear that? So I became convinced, and in my young years, I ran nightclubs for the longest time until one night I went out to serve the poor in Washington, D.C., and I ended up, what's that? D.C., D-Sizzo, my brother. But I was out on the streets of D.C. right next to the State Department serving people, and I ended up that night in a truck serving people metaphorically. I was up like this in a warm truck serving people outside in the rain. And the experience really left me cold, because it was that sense of, while it's always right and just to feed somebody, that charitable kind of undercurrent of it was more about the redemption of the giver, not the liberation of the receiver. And if we find a way to turn that around, and that's how I launched the DC Central Kitchen, and that's why for the past 30 years I've been doing the work I do, because I love taking things that our society views as part of the problem and try and reveal that the problem is really the way we see things, not the things themselves, that everything has the power to be part of the solution. So what I've historically done is try to take things that our society, again, undervalues. The food we throw away. Every single day in America, we throw away about 40% of the food we produce. More than enough food to feed everybody in the world, quite literally. But that idea is oftentimes the food that doesn't make it to the grocery stores is that cosmetically imperfect stuff. That small wrinkle, that blemish, that bruise. It's underripe. It's overripe. for a million different reasons. The majority of food we throw away is fruits and vegetables, which is why I've chosen here in LA to really focus on that idea of reclaiming fresh fruits and vegetables. Now, I look at fresh fruits and vegetables obviously as healthy food, but I'm really intrigued by the idea of food as medicine. You know, the idea of the role food can play. I look at the Central Valley and see the biggest pharmacy in the history of the world. But not just food. Again, I'm mesmerized by the people our society undervalues. Historically, I've worked with men and women who are home from prison, men and women who are off the streets, men and women who have spent decades in addiction, and that idea that those men and women can be equal partners. Again, not just in preparing the food, but setting the table. Because a big part of what we do is we realize that while many people look at the work I do and understandably think that my focus and my attention is all about feeding the poor brothers and sisters, there's a deeper hunger in America. And that's the hunger I seek to feed. There's this sense we all have of trying to be part of something bigger, of contributing, of feeling needed. So again, while at one level the kitchen does that for the men and women who are in our job training program, we bring in thousands of volunteers. Think about it. In probably one of the greatest experiments in the history of the world, we've raised an entire generation, the millennials, doing service. This is the biggest, most ethnically diverse generation, the most technologically advanced generation, but again, almost to a person they've been raised doing service. What an experiment that is. What potential that holds. You know, for a generation raised who have seen now philanthropy isn't necessarily the check at the end of the year, it's the way they live their life every single day. What a powerful idea. But I'm also interested in older Americans because, you know, Los Angeles, what most people don't realize, is home to the largest concentration of older people in America. And if you look at the baby boomers, they represent the deepest well of life experience in the history of the world. No other generation has been this rich, this free, this educated, and had the better soundtrack. And that idea that we push people away because they're wrinkled, because they're bent, because they're broken. The same way we throw away food. And again, if you're upset about the fact that we throw away so much food, be quadruply upset by the way we treat people. Now, the reality is, brothers and sisters, wrinkles are the new tattoos. You know, and there is gold in gray. But I'll tell you, like I said, that's what fascinates me, this idea of what's already there. Now, there are two stories I wanted to drop on you tonight and they all happened recently. There's a gentleman in our program who graduated recently. His name is Kevin. And man, you know, I walk around the kitchen a lot. I'm kind of ADT. I can sit for only so long, and then I got to walk around and kind of pull somebody else's attention away from what they should be doing, which is a story of my career. But Kevin and I were talking, and he just kind of dropped on me. He's like, "Hey, man, today's my birthday." And I'm like, "Oh, dude, happy birthday. You know, how old are you?" He's like, "No, I'm 50. And it's like, "Yo, dude, 50, right on, happy birthday." And he's like, "Yeah, man, this is my first one out in 31 years. You know," and dude, I'm like, fuck. Seriously, no, seriously, man, remember, I don't know about you all, but I remember so vividly when Nelson Mandela came out. You know, and that idea of 26 years behind bars. 26 years. You know, how could somebody be that positive? And when I looked at Kevin, I realized that my wife Claudia and I, man, we've been married 32, and so it meant every single day that I was able to love my wife, raise a family, leave my house, travel the world, build a business. Every single one of those days, Kevin sat in a small cell. But here he was, smiling, appreciative, happy to be included, and loving the fact that his job was making sure somebody else got a meal. And while Kevin took another man's life, what he'll tell you now is he's living a life for two people. You know, that he's making sure that while he can't bring that other person back, and what he's trying to do is make sure that he's living a life for that person and himself through the way he cares for others. Now, this morning I was over at the kitchen, and another young woman, Teresa, who I refer to as kind of the Harriet Tubman of our organization. Harriet Tubman is one of my favorite Americans, and the fact is, you know, most people don't get this, but Harriet Tubman was basically like 4'9" and didn't even weigh 100 pounds. Tiny, tiny little woman. But 19 times she went down south to pull people out. And I've always been intrigued by her. And Teresa was our first graduate, our first graduate employee, and she's been with me ever since the very beginning. But she was guiding a group of students who had a big mountain of apples. And we were talking together about it, and she's like, watch this, watch this. And I just kept paying attention to her because there was one apple that was all kinds of messed up. You know, nobody wanted to touch this apple. And everybody kept getting around. They kept grabbing an apple because they had to cut them up, right? Everybody kept grabbing an apple, and the one apple just stood there and kept going further and further down to the bottom. And finally, Teresa stopped these children and were saying something to the effect of, you know, why hasn't anybody messed with this apple yet? And they were all like, you know, ooh, wish you would, you know, as we all would. But again, in that deft, beautiful, joyful, simple way, she just took the apple out and revealed that on the other side, it was fine. You know, and it was wild to watch. We have a process called the calculated epiphany, that idea of we never want to tell people what to think. But food, like music, can be a powerful tool. And there's really this simple way in which Teresa was able to help these young women see that, again, you can't judge something from the outside. And the glorious thing is they left realizing that was their idea. You know, they went home all excited by this idea that, again, they need to look past something. And that's why, if I can, I want to kind of pull this together with something that I've been wanting to talk about for a while. The glory of these opportunities that Light, I'm so generous, so grateful for, is it gives me a chance to stretch myself a little bit and talk about things. And many of you all know that Sharon Jones passed this morning. And I don't know how many of you all know the Dap Kings and Sharon, but man, I got to tell you, but it's interesting because, you know, as a society, I've watched this for years. We've been trained when someone passes to immediately go to the mourning, to immediately go to, oh, that's too bad, without stopping and really saying, like, damn, what a ride. First time I really thought about this, man, I remember a bunch of friends were sitting around when we heard Lou Reed had died. Everybody's like, oh, man, it's like, no, you're fucking crazy, man. Lou Reed was a bisexual addict who made it through the 70s and the 80s and came out the other side alive and still producing, and they'll be singing his song for decades. Man, right on. Lou Reed, what a fucking life, you know? Seriously. You know, but that's what's wild, man, because this year there's been a lot of people that have passed. You know, there's been a lot of people that have given each one of us in our own history a sense of, like, that moment where it's tempting. And Leon Russell. Leon Russell. I don't know how many of you all know Leon Russell, but if you don't, man, go out and rent the movie Mad Dogs and Englishmen, Joe Cocker's first tour of America. But man, you know, Leon talked about that idea of, you know, walking on the tightrope. You know, one side hate and one side hope. And that's the point of the shine. You know, it's that opportunity to stop and realize that we're all on a tightrope. You know, when we have a choice. You know, you can look on the side of hate and be afraid, or you can look on the side of hope. You know, man, think about Denise Matthews, Vanity. Man, Vanity 6. I don't know how many of you all were into Vanity 6, but man, she was the nasty girl. You know, and you can be upset about the loss of the nasty girl or the defeat of the nasty woman. Or you can set your sights high and fight for the next nasty woman or the next bad hombre. Because brothers and sisters, we're all immigrants. And as Vice President Mike Pence heard last night when he went to see Hamilton, man, immigrants get it done. For those of you all who are still down about Fife Dog, you know, man, the reality is none of us are flawless, you know. But the point is we can all say what the fuck we feel. You know, that's the point. You know, life gives us. That's one of the joys of our life. Again, we can try and be something we're not, but we can at least try and be who we are. You know, Leonard Cohen. Leonard Cohen. Now, again, when you see old people walking down the street, remember, Leonard Cohen was 73, and that guy was still out there doing it. But the reality is, yeah, not every day can you wake up singing hallelujah. But, man, if you see the cracks and realize that's how the truth and the light and the beauty and the love gets in, man, you can take it for another day. You know, and there's just so many interesting people like this, man. You know, if you think about Maurice White from Earth, Wind, and Fire, and another sad one. But the reality is, brothers and sisters, you're a shining star. No matter, you know, man, you're just that idea. You know, that we're all shining stars. You know, and man, the original Starman, David Bowie. You know, but we're all going through changes. But we can all be heroes. You know, we can all be heroes. We can choose to spit on those who are immune to our consultation. Or we can choose to be heroes, not for just one day, but for every day. And I don't know about you all. I do not know about you all. But man, my wife Claudia and I, man, we accepted Prince as our sexual messiah back in 1983. And there's There's nobody who can take the place of my man. There's nobody who can take the place of my man. But Prince, dear Lord, Prince taught me so much. So much. And I got to tell you, man, if you're like me, you know, and you want to make the world a better place, you don't want to submit. You don't want to give up. You know, you don't want to do all those things that they told you when you were young you had to do. If you want to believe, then morning, noon and night, I will give you what's inside my head. You know, I will give you what's in my heart. I will give you what's in my soul. I will stand next to you. I will fight with you. I will stand and fight for you. I will do whatever it takes to make this world a better place. Brothers and sisters, you can curse the light. I choose to see the shine. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Robert.